What's up guys, and welcome back to another Reddit reading video. Let's get right into the stories. Part 1. I just found out I have a brother that my parents keep locked in the attic. I have been living in that house since I was 2 years old, so the noises I heard coming from the attic weren't strange to me. When I was little, my mom would tell me fairies were living there to watch over us. If I was really bad, they would come and take me, and I would have to live with them forever. I know she was trying to frighten me, but I don't think she actually realized how much it scared me. I used to have a recurring nightmare of some unseen force taking me out of bed and putting me in a burlap sack. I could feel every bump as they dragged me up those attic stairs. It felt so real. Then I would wake up in my bed and it would be morning. I was too terrified to get out of bed at night, but every now and then I would hear footsteps and think they were coming for me and sprint as fast as I could to my parents' room. One of my earliest memories was me diving into their bed after hearing something moving around up there in the middle of the night. I would make my dad check every inch of that house, especially the attic door, before I'd go back to bed. I was always afraid he would forget to put the chains back on after feeding them. I used to hide under the covers with my mother's arms wrapped around me. She used to sing to me and I would usually be asleep by the time he returned. She had such a soothing voice. I always believed nothing could harm me as long as I was in her arms. She was so calm no matter what happened. I can't remember one time she raised her voice to me. Not even when I tried to wash her new car with paint thinners I found in the shed. My dad wasn't as calm as my mom, but he never shouted at me. He believed communication was the key to any good relationship. So, whenever I got in trouble, he would sit me down and explain everything to me in a way that I could understand. I always respected him for that, and I suppose it worked. I was polite and respectful. They never had any of the neighbors call to complain about me. I might have had 1 or 2 mishaps at school over the years, but I never got taken to the principal's office or anything like that. Plus, I had good grades, so I think they must have been happy with me. The town I live in is small with less than 1,000 people, but we are a very tight-knit community. Everyone knows everyone and we all look out for each other. It's one of the safest places in the country to raise a child. My dad keeps telling me the sheriff lives 3 houses up. My dad's best friend since childhood, Tony, lives across the street from us. My teacher lives in the next block. It doesn't make sense how my parents managed to hide a child in the attic all these years without someone finding out. Our next door neighbor, Mrs. Henson, went on a date with a guy she met on Facebook a few years back while her husband was at a bar. The whole town knew about it before she even got out of the restaurant, even though it happened 2 towns over. That's the thing about small towns. Everyone knows your business. So how did my parents get away with it for so long? Looking back, I probably should have noticed something was up. The constant scratching, the crying, the chained door. Then there was the feeding bucket. I guess when you are a kid you will believe anything your parents tell you. If you can't trust them, who can you trust? By the time I stopped believing in fairies, my parents had me convinced that raccoons were living up there, and my dad was treating them for rabies. I don't know how I believed them. It sounds so stupid now, but it worked. I never went near the attic. I did ask them once why they didn't just call an exterminator. My mom told me if they did, they would have to get put to sleep. She said every creature should get a second chance, no matter how sick they are. I don't know if my dad felt the same. I would hear him pacing up and down the hallway upstairs every night before feeding time. My mom and I used to wait in the kitchen. The steps to the attic were directly over us, so I would often hear weird noises when he opened the door. My mom would try to hide it by putting on music. The weird thing about it is, they were some of my happiest memories. We would always be singing and dancing until my dad came back and called my mom into the other room. His eyes were always red and bloodshot. He told me it was because of the attic insulation, but sometimes I would put my ear up to the door to listen in, and I was sure I could hear him sobbing. Elle first started to get suspicious about a year ago. It was my dad's birthday, and he had a bit too much to drink and forgot to lock the attic door. I only noticed when I got up to go to the toilet. I tried to warn him, but he was out cold on the couch. I didn't want to wake my mom, so I went back to bed. A while later I was awoken by a weird noise, but I thought it came from the attic, so I didn't think anything of it and tried to go back to sleep. Before I got a chance to close my eyes, I heard a thud. It sounded like it came from the end of my bed. So I got a fright and jumped up. Staring into the darkness, I could just about make out a shadowy figure rocking over and back in the corner. The noise was coming from them banging their head on the wall as they swayed back and forth repeatedly. First, I thought it was my dad. He was very drunk that night. He was a bit of a lightweight. We once found him asleep in the bathtub wrapped in a towel because he couldn't make it to his room. "Dad, is that you?" I whispered, but he didn't answer. Frustrated, I blurted out, "Dad, for God's sake, will you answer me?" Suddenly the thud started to become louder and closer together. That's when I realized it wasn't my dad. I could feel the blood rushing to my head and my heart started jumping to the beat. Thud, 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 thud of his head hitting the wall. I wanted to shout out for help, but I was breathing so heavily I thought I was going to faint. Then it just stopped, and the only sound I could hear apart from my racing heart was the intense shallow breathing coming from whoever was standing at the end of my bed. As I watched him slowly turn toward me, there was a moment where I thought I was going to die. I couldn't feel my heart anymore, and I am fairly sure my life flashed before my eyes. I then heard him shout, "Josh," before laughing maniacally. I will tell you this, I screamed louder than I ever screamed in my life. I wouldn't be surprised if I woke the whole town. I don't remember much after that. I may have passed out. I don't know how my parents kept doing this, but they were able to convince me it was all a dream, and I believed them even when I found a head-shaped dent on my wall the next day. I guess they were my parents and I never expected them to lie to me. But the veil had been lifted and I started to notice every little noise that came from the attic, and it scared the hell out of me. The following months were tough. I hated going to bed, and by then I was too old to run into the safety of my mother's arms, so I hid under the covers every night in case that thing came back. It took a long time, but eventually I began to recover, and things started to go back to normal. If only for a short time. I don't know why my mom and dad kept this from me for so long. They must have known I would find out sooner or later. They probably thought it would scare me and wanted to wait until I was a bit older. But they were wrong. Nothing could have scared me as much as it did that night. My dad had a few too many again, and ended up falling asleep on the couch. To be fair to him, he wasn't always like that. I guess keeping a secret that big took its toll on him. I didn't even notice the attic door was unlocked when I went to bed. I was probably too tired from staying up late the night before on the PS, so by the time my head hit the pillow, I was out cold. I don't know how long after it was, but something woke me. I heard, "Josh, Josh, please wake up." I was after coming out of a deep sleep and could barely keep my eyes open, so I thought I was dreaming and pulled the covers over my head. I then felt a hand on my shoulder. "Josh, please, we are running out of time." When I turned around, I saw that shadowy figure standing over me again. I freaked out and screamed uncontrollably. Moments later, my dad rushed into my room and turned on the light. That's when I saw its face, and it terrified me. My dad put a sack over his head and had him dragged out of there in seconds. The only thing he said to me was, "Did he touch you?" But I was in shock and couldn't answer, so he locked me in my room. It was the next morning before he came back. By then I started to come around and wanted answers. He didn't walk in right away like he usually would. Instead he knocked. "Josh," my dad said, "I need you to answer this question truthfully. Can you do that?" "Dad, why am I locked in here? What's happening?" I replied nervously. "Josh," he shouted. That was the first time I ever heard him talk like that to me, so I got frightened and started to cry. "Josh, just listen," he said, this time in a calmer tone. "Everything will be okay, son. Just answer the question, please." I blurted out, "No, Dad, he didn't touch me." "Why? Did I do something wrong?" "No, son. You did good," he replied as he let out a sigh of relief. Then he walked away, and I heard nothing from him for hours. When he came back, Mom was with him. She had a burger and fries which she left down on the bed beside me. I knew things were bad when she couldn't even look me in the eye. When I asked them what was wrong, they seemed to struggle to get the words out. They were usually very vocal, so it was weird to see them like that. When they eventually started explaining what was going on, it shocked me to my core. They told me I had a brother that they kept locked in the attic all these years. I didn't know what to say, but it did explain what I saw that night and why that shadowy figure looked so much like me. They said he was born with a dangerous condition, and they had to lock him in the attic to keep everyone safe. But they assured me it was okay as long as I didn't have any contact with him. When I asked them why they didn't just take him to the hospital to get help, they told me it wasn't that kind of sickness. I must have had a million questions to ask them, but I think it was too much to process at the time. So I just got angry with them and told them I never wanted to talk to them again. I don't know if I could ever trust them after what they did, what else they were lying about. And what about my poor brother? They are monsters. How could they keep anyone locked away like that? Especially their own flesh and blood. Will they do the same to me someday? What's worse, I know my brother is locked up there, alone and scared. I really want to help him, but I am worried they might be telling the truth and he is sick. Then I would only make things worse. Part 2. I just found out I have a brother that my parents keep locked in the attic. With what's been happening the last few days, I started to believe I was losing it. I didn't know what was real anymore. Before I found out I had a brother, I had the perfect life. A loving family, good friends, and zero stress. Now all I have is paranoia and loneliness. I wish I could go back to that night and wake my dad or mom and make sure that door was locked. That way he would have never escaped. And I would be living in my dream world, oblivious to the truth. But at least I would be happy since I found out about him. That's all I could think about. My birthday was coming up and my parents usually threw me a party. The thoughts of that really hit me. The cake, the presents, surrounded by all my family and friends. It seems so cruel now. Last year was one of the best I had. I got everything I wanted. While he was up there in a cold, dark attic, the only company he got was a brief visit from my dad. And that was just to feed him. I don't think I will be able to celebrate anything like that ever again without thinking of him. I will never forgive my parents for that. I don't care what is wrong with him. No one deserves a life like that. And I was going to do whatever I could to free him. I tried talking to my parents a few times after that night. I was hoping they would have given me some sort of logical explanation for what they did to him, but they denied everything and tried to make me believe it was just a dream. They nearly had me fooled too, until one night I overheard them talking in their room. My mom said something about his condition, that it can't be controlled, and that he could hurt a lot of people again if he got out. Then they started arguing about what to do with him. My mom wanted to keep him close, but my dad wanted to send him back. To where? I don't know. Mom came storming out of the room before I could find out and caught me listening in. I tried to confront her and told her what I had heard, but she believes I am that same stupid little kid that thought fairies lived in the attic and told me some bullshit story. But I knew better. That was the last time I asked them any questions like that again. They would only lie to me anyways. If I were going to find out the truth, I would have to be smart. The only problem was they had become very suspicious of me. So I had to make them believe I was on their side. It was easy. They are sociopaths. They thought they could fool me into believing anything they said. All I had to do was play dumb and agree with whatever they told me. By day I was their perfect little angel, always obedient, like the trained monkey they wanted me to be. But by night while they were sleeping, I started to communicate with my brother by gently knocking on the ceiling. He may not have understood me, but at least he knew I was there for him. That was the only time I felt normal. I was unable to sleep, and when I did, I had horrible nightmares. I started to feel really lonely at night. So after a while I began speaking to him. I didn't care if he could hear me or not. I was just happy to have someone to talk to. I was sure I was never going to get a reply until one night he must have found a way to get into the air vents, because I began to hear him whispering. The first night it only lasted a few seconds, and it was kind of muffled, but I'm sure he said, "It's in your food, check their closet." I wasn't sure exactly what he meant. So the next day when my mom was cooking dinner and dad was at work, I checked to see if he was telling the truth. In the back of my mom's closet I found a bottle with my name on the label. It was dated for the day after they told me about my brother, and it was almost half empty. I couldn't believe it. They were actually drugging me. But it did explain all the weird things I was seeing. I was sure they were putting it in my food, so after that, whenever they gave me something that they prepared, I threw it out when they weren't looking. But they must have found another way, because things only got worse. The horrible nightmares I had started happening while I was awake. The first time I experienced it, I was in the bathroom washing my hands after having dinner at my friend's house. Suddenly, I heard giggling and little footsteps outside the door. I was sure it was just Tony's little sister. So I said, "Just a minute, I'm nearly done." Then everything went dark, even though it was the middle of the day. I panicked and ran for the door, but tripped and fell. When I tried to get up, something grabbed my legs, then my arms, and I could feel myself getting dragged away. The next thing I knew, I was on the bathroom floor screaming like a little girl. Tony's parents were standing over me. It was so embarrassing. I really freaked them out. So they rang my parents. I tried to convince them that a bug scared me, but I don't think they believed me. They were acting weird for the rest of the night. When I went home that night, my brother started talking to me again. This time his voice was clear. and I could understand him perfectly. He told me my parents drug him every day, and that's why he can only talk at night. He said they were part of a cult and they believed he was possessed. So as a baby, they wanted to sacrifice him, but my mom couldn't do it. So she faked his death instead. Unfortunately, she believed he still had a demon inside him and locked him up ever since. I really didn't want to trust him. But what choice did I have? If he is right and I do nothing, I could be living up there with him for the rest of my life. I don't know what will happen if I am wrong, but surely it can't be any worse than this. He asked me to steal the key from Dad, but he always has it in his pocket. So I would have to sneak into their room in the middle of the night to find it. I begged him to let me go to the cops instead, but he said they wouldn't believe me without proof. The problem is, I am a nervous wreck. When I was a child, I stole a cookie from the cookie jar before dinner. All through that dinner, I was on the verge of a panic attack. In the end, I couldn't take the pressure anymore and confessed everything. So the night when I was meant to steal the key, I chickened out at the last minute. I felt so guilty for being such a coward. And to make it worse, I could hear him whispering things like, "Please, Josh, help me before it's too late, or do you want to be locked up here with me because you will?" I heard them talking about it. He went on like that for most of the night. I was too ashamed to reply and tried to ignore him. But it was hard because I could hear the desperation in his voice. By morning, I had enough. I could not face another night like that. So while my parents were out, I spent the entire day searching for that key, or at least some sort of proof that I had a brother to show the police. I didn't find the key, but I did find something in a photo album. My mom loved that kind of thing. She was very organized. She documented every step of my life since I was about 3 or 4. But weirdly, there was nothing before that. It was like I didn't exist. Oh yeah, there was one more thing. I found a burlap sack shoved in behind the fridge with a little bottle of clear liquid and a hypodermic needle inside. That was the last straw. I was sure everything my brother told me was the truth and my parents were planning to lock me up. I couldn't wait until that night to break him out. So I got a claw hammer from the shed and tried to break the locks. The first one was easy. It only took a few hard strikes. But the other 2 were strong and wouldn't budge. I gave up when I whacked my finger off the corner of the door and went looking for something bigger. Unfortunately, when I got to the bottom of the stairs, my mom walked in and screamed when she saw me. Then my dad started chasing me. Luckily, I got out the back door before he caught me. I hid in the forest behind my house for hours trying to figure out what to do, before I finally made the decision to go to the police. By then it was nearly nightfall. The whole way there I went over everything in my head to make sure I got my story straight. But by the time I actually got there, I had become so nervous I was shaking. I walked in and saw the sheriff standing up behind the desk talking to a woman with his back to me. I was about to speak, but the woman screamed. It was only then I realized all my clothes were covered in blood from the cut I got from banging my hand off the door. By the looks on their faces, I'd say they thought I was after murdering someone. I tried to speak again but stuttered. At that moment, I was sure they were going to pull out their guns and order me to get on the floor or something like that. But instead, the sheriff calmly said, "Son, you hurt." It was at that moment that it all hit me, and I broke down crying. I told him everything, and I mean everything. I even told him about the recurring dream I had as a child. He must have thought I was crazy. I was waiting for him to throw me into a cell. But he didn't. He just said, "Everything's okay, son. Come with me." And he took me to the car. I started to freak out when he stopped outside my house. So he told me to wait there until he came back. To my relief, because I really didn't want to go inside. I have no idea how long he was in there, but it seemed like hours. I was going over all kinds of scenarios in my head. From my parents chopping up the sheriff and hiding his body to him coming out with a burlap sack and dragging me to the attic himself. I was nervous but slightly relieved when I saw the sheriff walking towards me. When he asked me to come with him, I nearly shit myself. Terrified, I blurted out, "Please don't make me go in there. They will lock me in the attic with my brother," while he held my hand and took me inside. "Relax, son. There is nothing to be afraid of." That's all he said to me as he took me upstairs. At the attic door, I panicked and tried to run, but I ended up running into my dad's arms. At that point, I was sure it was all one big conspiracy, and I was going to be locked up there forever. So I kicked and screamed the whole way like a toddler. When I got to the top, I realized there was nothing up there apart from a few old boxes and some Christmas decorations. It didn't make any sense. I was lost for words. I really thought there would still be some sign of him up there. but there was nothing. When I asked why they always kept the attic door locked, my dad said it was because the floors were only partly finished, and he was afraid I would fall through the ceiling and get hurt. As my mom walked me to my room, I heard my dad tell the sheriff that I had stopped taking my meds. The truth is, I was beginning to believe him and thought it was all in my imagination, until my mom whispered in my ear, "Don't give in, fight," like I did as she put me to bed. I hope that story doesn't give you too many nightmares tonight, but if you enjoyed it, don't be scared to leave a like and let me know what else you want to see down in the comments. See you next time.